So I'm just going to introduce Randy briefly. I'm sure a lot of you are already very familiar with Randy, but he is the CEO of 2B3D, which is an award-winning internet media company which is focused on emerging technologies. He pioneered work in web-based multimedia and intranet technology. And I don't know what that noise is, but thank you. Randy serves on the faculty at the University of Washington's iSchool and is also the co-editor of a book which has just been published within the last few days, along with Charles Wankel as the other editor, and it's called Transforming Virtual World Learning in the series Cutting Edge Technologies in Higher Education, and that's the book that he's here to introduce you to today. And so if you're ready, Randy, I'll hand over the floor to you.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody, and thank you for being here. I had the opportunity about a year ago to review Charles' book, Virtual Worlds in Higher Education, I believe is what it was called, and I asked two of my students to review it with me. And we really got into it, got to meet Charles real well, and then Charles said, you know what, there really isn't anything practical out there in the material that is available for education in virtual worlds. There's lots of studies and things, but is there anything that people could just pick up and start using and implement something like that in their environments? And so Charles and I embarked on collecting a group of papers of people who had successfully created virtual world applications, mostly inside of Second Life. There are instances of others as well. And people who had been in there, we gave them the perimeter of 4 years at least, whether they had accomplished something. And we coupled that with asking each one of those folks to write lesson plans as well, so that people had the ability to just pick things straight up and start thinking about them. And around that, we framed this whole concept of transforming virtual world learning. And what did that mean to us? That means that it required a new way of thinking within depth inside of 3D. It meant that we really were going to talk a lot about avatars interacting with objects in virtual places. And our work at 2B3D and the work that Charles and I had focused on was how to design and integrate the physical world with the virtual world in a practical way. And we created this book that has 4 sections in it, Transforming Virtual World Planning, and I'll talk about what we mean by that. Transforming Virtual World Design, transforming virtual world development for long-term use, and transforming virtual world deployment. The planning chapters recommend bringing the faculty or the teachers, if you're doing this in industry, directly into the center of the process at the very beginning and showing them the affordances of virtual worlds inside the virtual world. Less going to businesses and classrooms and asking what is it that you want the virtual world to do. Instead, you bring the physical into the virtual and start asking them, what do you want to do here? In the design chapters, we talk about building communities first and engaging people in the process immediately so that they're immersed and every one of their activities are centered around doing something as the virtual world gets built for them. In the development chapter, we underscore the dynamics of narrative, the dynamics of workforces working together in the environment, leveraging all of the commercial assets that are available out there to accelerate time to deployment, and leveraging social networks and the assets of social networks as well, so using and bringing in lots of mentors. The book comes with discussions of successful applications of virtual worlds, like I said, and lesson plans for those who wish to carry them out. Let me move to my second slide here. Fundamentally, the book basically focuses on 2 concepts. One of the concepts you may know Lesley is responsible for with her colleagues is this whole concept of cybergogy. So if you're a traditional instructional designer, you probably think Briggs and Gagne, or you probably think Bloom's taxonomy. But what Lesley and her colleagues really dig into is what are those learning archetypes and what are those domains that an individual needs to build or design and build around. So understanding learning from within the virtual environment rather than, again, trying to apply instructional design concepts in a traditional fashion. We're talking about an enhanced fashion where you're thinking about what the virtual world does. And one of the things that the authors do in the book is they talk a lot about faculty development. We've seen this in our industry as well, where we'll build something for a large client, and unless they engage in developing their faculty who are going to come in and use the technology to get beyond presentations and get beyond just simple lecturing to people, is to look for ways to develop them so that they understand the technical constraints of the environment, the pedagogical or cybergogical constraints of the environment, and then they begin to start exploring the affordances. And they do that with a set of frameworks that were built in these successful authors' experiences, and compare it with lesson plans that get people actively involved from the very beginning. The second most important feature, I think, that underscores the book in general is this whole concept of residency. You know this because you all do this. The longer you stay here, the more you adapt to the environment, the more you transfer your set of skills for mimicking conversation, mimicking attention management, thinking about how to herd cats when you're moving people through tours, developing in an environment where people use a lot of dialogue between each other. One of the things I always have my students do when we're talking is I ask them a question and I ask them to slap me a Y in chat. So it's very simple. It's just like, have you purchased this book yet? Yes or no? And then the students, like you can see me doing, just all automatically start integrating in the environment a dialogue. I ask them also to express their emotions here because in this community of inquiry, you have to make sure that people get this whole sense of emoting in the environment. So I'll ask them, well, can you give me some kind of happy icon? Or can you tell me that you're not happy? Some kind of experience like that. And they move from those very primitive emoticons to larger ways of expressing themselves as a consequence of being in the environment for a long period of time. The second thing that the book concentrates on is creating problem-based learning. So looking for examples of salt marshes that have ecological problems, and the students have to go to the salt marsh and they have to begin to use instrumentation in the field to find out why the salt marsh is, and all the plants in the salt marsh are dying, or why the animals that live in the environment are dying. Similarly, in a clinical situation where you will have somebody who comes in an emergency and you want to hook them up to different kinds of machinery and get their vital readings, and then you have another person come in to the side of them in an emergency room, and this individual has to decide how to manage these two people at the same time. While there's lots of noise playing around in the environment, people are moving around, you've got to find resources. These kinds of problem-based environments are discussed a lot in the book. And then the other component that I think is important in this conversation is the recognition of intercultural differences when working with people from different countries. You might have experienced this yourself, but in some countries, asking people to verbalize and express themselves is not as favorable in some countries as it is in other countries. Some countries think that this concept of open dialogue and open access is a good thing, while others honor the instructor or the professor as the expert and only want that person to be talking all of the time. Similar in small breakout groups, if you're going to have people break out into groups and you ask them to self-select a leader, they might end up not doing that very successfully because it's not within their culture to do that. On the other hand, one of the things that you can do with these intercultural collaborations is that, as you all know, you can bring people from anywhere in the world into the environment and have them interact with the students from their cultural perspective. And this is one of the ways that we get that diversification of residency in the environment where people start to habituate a person to be talking all of the time. Similar in small breakout groups, if you're going to have people break out into groups and you ask them to self-select a leader, they might end up not doing that very successfully because it's not within their culture to do that. On the other hand, one of the things that you can do with these intercultural collaborations is that, as you all know, you can bring people from anywhere in the world into the environment and have them interact with the students from their cultural perspective. And this is one of the ways that we get that diversification of residency in the environment where people start to habituate to the environment for long periods of time. Well, as you can see from the country slide, that we thought it was extremely important to make sure that we found authors who represented pretty much the entire continent, where we're looking from Asia to Europe, across America, in the UK. You see in the activities, if you look at trends.google.com, you can take a look at the various requests for information around virtual worlds, and you can get a feel for where this demand is coming from. And we use that in part in terms of looking at where is most of the activity happening in the virtual world right now, so we made sure that we had that kind of representation. And you can tell by looking at the author's slide that we found a combination of people from universities, people from community college, we've got some PhDs who bring their expertise, and we've got doctoral students as well that are authoring in this book to bring their unique perspective. One of the things we get from using the younger exploratory population is the integration of social networks in the environment. We find that the interface between Facebook and LinkedIn and blogging, all of these things can be brought into the virtual world fairly clearly and put up on prims to integrate with the environment. You see people creating wikis and blogs for long periods of time with their students in residency. So they're literally creating a book or a compendium of articles and activity of opinions. And when you refine those things with the student, even though they're 2D, you're incorporating 2D into the 3D environment and using them wherever you want to. Some of my students wear their wikis over their head and allow you to see what their long-term contributions are in the world here. Okay, let's dig a little bit deeper into thinking in 3D. One of the things that we recommend when you're working with a client or you're working with students or consultants is when you ask them what is it that they want to do, we always invite everyone directly into the environment and ask them to come into Second Life and sit with us. We want them to feel the pain. And we say that on purpose because there are technological constraints. Sometimes there's firewall constraints. So we want to get through that right up front. And if a client is in a situation where the firewall is way too constraining, then we ask them to let's look at another virtual world. The whole point is not which virtual world to go into, but which one is going to be most accommodating for you. And the way to do that is to get them explore those different environments and invite them in. When you do invite them in, you want to invite them in and have several people around you, not just invite them in yourself. You want to have what we use as mentors, where we have individuals that know how to deal with people at all certain levels, people that are very advanced in the virtual world and people that are novices in the virtual world. And as the conversation begins, which sometimes we begin with a con call, but at the same time working in the virtual environment at the same time, we get the ability to slowly but surely bring people in, move them over to the right group, and get them to walk around. And get them to walk around by looking at various places that you bring them to, so that you can show them how whiteboards work. You can show them what it would be like to be on a trolley and move around the city of San Francisco because they want to look at some city planning. Whatever the content area is that they're interested in, bring them using virtual tours into that area. The other thing that you want to do is that you want to make sure that you demo inside the world as well. So be prepared, like the authors have, to just drop things on the ground and demonstrate the effect of 3D very effectively. I think I can drop things on the ground. I think I have that permission. One of the things that I recommend doing is putting down an object that gets people to interact, so I can make sure that I can't res. Darn, I thought I could res. All right, sorry. What I was going to do is I was going to res a balloon maker that I was going to ask you to start popping the balloons for me. And what that does is it motivates them to see that they can do something fun here while you're explaining to them the various aspects of what can be done while they're thinking about what is it to be in the environment. The next thing is that, one thing that you want to do, and then we found that everybody who has successfully written about this and has explored these different virtual worlds is make sure that you secure some long-term funding when you're going to be working in this space. I think we're out of the era of let's do prototypes, and I think we're in the area of let's do applications. Let's make sure that when you're building in this environment that you're building out an entire class. As we did with Ernst & Young, for example, we not only built the class, but we made sure that the assessment that would achieve CEUs, continuing education units, was also embedded in the solution. I see where Gronstedt's tag. That would definitely get it. Thank you, Lesley. That you make sure that you have things like tables of contents, that you have indexes in the environment, that you have really good navigation between procedure number 1, procedure number 2, procedure number 3. So it's very clear to the user that it's logical, that it uses the cybergogy elements that Lesley talks about. It's linear in its sense of making sure that you move from one area to another very effectively. You get some kind of assessment. Either it could be through an in-world test, something as simple as that, a dialogue with an expert like you saw in, maybe you've seen in the IBM Commons, where they have speed consulting, where you have one individual come to a table with 6 or 7 avatars around them, and then have those 6 or 7 avatars be able to ask speed questions to the consultant so that they can learn something very quickly. Let's say they want to learn about cloud computing, and then that counselor gets up, and then another one comes down, and those 6 people get to have that person for just a few minutes. Those kinds of interactivity feedback mechanisms are really good for securing the kind of environment that you want to secure. But what this is going to do is it's not lightweight. It's going to cost some money to either build a population, a residency around island or a concept that already exists, so that you're going to have people cost in order to sustain it for some period of time, or you're going to have to do some development where you're going to create an environment that is unique and customized for that individual. So looking, and this chart here is from Second Earth. You might recognize it. It's the federal budget. It shows you where some of those dollars might be. There's a lot of money in the government right now for building different kinds of learning experiences in the National Science Foundation, the National Institute of Health, the Department of Defense, this sort of thing. So make sure that when you're thinking in 3D that you secure long-term funding. And all of the authors who write in the book say the same thing. In planning in a virtual world, again, I think that it's extremely important that you bring your plans directly into the environment, so that just like the screens that we're standing in front of now, you have project plans that are up and running in the environment so that you can see them all of the time. You have, I don't know, your resource, your hierarchy of who's who in the environment, Gantt charts that explain when your deliverables are, milestones. This is the only way that you can successfully engage in the environment and transform the planning process so that everybody basically sees that you're on the same page. And if you can see, if you zoom into this picture, that you want to be able to put those directly in the environment, where I'm pointing with this orange arrow, and slap your planning information down in the environment so that when people come to look and do the walkthroughs through the environment, they can get a full comprehensive view of what the status of the work is at all time. And I think this changes the way people think about working in a virtual world. Instead of having con calls and telephone calls and somebody puts up a PowerPoint or writes a report, this engages people in the environment, makes them do lots of walkthroughs. And it's when they start walking through a space like you do when you're building a building, is when you start making all those super fine nuance changes, because your plans have to be dynamic in the environment. If you work in the environment, you adapt to the environment, and the culture of progress becomes part of the environment. Because one thing about virtual worlds that's very transformative is that you can see what you're doing all the time. It's not that you're thinking about work sites that are existing somewhere and that maybe you're going to visit them once a month or once a quarter. You see these on a daily basis. And because virtual worlds are persistent, not only can you see it during the time that a team is together reviewing the plan, but you can come anytime you want and walk around it or show people around it if you like to. One of the other things that's highly suggested in the literature that we incorporate as well is that you make sure that you have access to experts, and you have to habituate people to doing this and get them to turn on Second Life in the corner, if you will, the way you have instant messaging on, or actually use instant messaging, or use Google Talk, or use any of the instant communications for people. Because if you wanted to bring somebody into the environment and they pop in and their avatar appears in the space, that whole physiological experience of having people together in the same room adds credibility. And we've even seen it in the research where people when they're put on the spot, or when somebody's landing in the environment, or somebody starts to interacting with you directly, that, your heart starts to race. You actually sweat because it's your turn to come up and engage in the environment. So we know how realistic it is, and we know how powerful it is cognitively when you bring experts into the environment and people are being able to interact with them. It creates a sense of trust and confidence in what you're doing that people respond to very quickly. When it comes to design, I think that everything that you do in the environment, whether it's storyboards or whether it's drawing or whether it's experimentation or even little baby prototypes or demos, that you're constantly evolving that inside of the environment. It might start with simple graphics up on the screen, or it might start with laying something down. Quite often, like you see in the in the foil, that's the olden days, in the presentation board down there, that you'll see the building emerging right before your eyes. And you can do those as little tiny models so that people can walk around them fairly quickly. But I think that the whole point here is that the more you visualize the design, the more easily people buy into it, and they want to think about ways to constantly improve it. When you speak to anyone about transforming the way they do business by using virtual environments, it's this concept of persistence, as I already said, is dynamism as much as possible. And third, this whole concept of realism. I think that the literature is becoming pretty complete on this. The more realistic that you build something, likely the more that people are going to identify with it. When it gets to people, of course, you've heard of the, what is it called? The Enchanted Valley. No, I forget what it's called now. It'll come back to me later. When it comes to people and avatars, you can get so real. Uncanny Valley. Thank you, Peter. The Uncanny Valley. And the Uncanny Valley states that when you get closer to a sense of creating a real person like you did with Anthony Hopkins and Beowulf, you get to a point where people start finding it to be creepy because it looks almost real, like Jeff Bridges did in Tron, but it is kind of scary because what you're expecting the individual to do, they don't do. So certain facial features seem a little odd. But you can back up on that with the avatar in particular, and you can do pretty good similarities of the self in the environment, and then people find a level of comfort. That's true also with proxemics. If I start approaching you and become very close, to you if you're paying attention to your avatar. You'll feel uncomfortable with me in the environment. Again, that's something that is supported in the literature in Blazkowicz and Bailithson's book on avatars called Infinite Reality. And when you're designing avatars, you have to be aware of these concepts and these features. When you're designing buildings, we find that in one of the chapters on architecture, we find that there are principles that people adhere to inside of the virtual environment, and they want to see certain things with buildings. So you have to think about these when you're building these kinds of frameworks. You know very clearly from any experiences that the more immersion that you create in the environment, the more you design in, the happier people are going to be. Here in our warehouse, in an inventory audit situation, people have to count the number of items inside of a warehouse. Well, that seems really simple because you could pull down boxes and open them up and start counting them. But what happens using problem-based learning techniques when the box is way up on the third shelf? How are you supposed to get that down? These are the kinds of issues that people face in the physical world when they go to various manufacturing plants and they have to start counting inventory. Is that something that's taught necessarily in the in the classes that they take to figure out how to prepare themselves for inventory audits, or is this one of those kinds of situations that present themselves that's going to use some of their soft skills? In this situation, they have to get a forklift and they have to bring a box down from the top of the shelf, and it's really great that they do that because the box is incomplete and doesn't have the right amount of inventory in it. In order to really use the virtual environment, manipulating objects is something that is very powerful to help people get this whole sense of immersion so that they're moving things from one location to another for a reason. So make sure that you have a reason. In deployment, with the T hanging off in the very end, I think that the communication here, that the people who've been in the virtual worlds, like we said, for 4 years or longer, have all begun to deploy automatically. Number one, they think about ways to extend the technology, the virtual experience, to the other platforms. So what is your mobile strategy for your environment? Do you have a way of tweeting people when you're having an event so that people are on their cell phones and are able to communicate across these intercultural boundaries that we talk about? Do you have, an iPad application? Have you thought about that? And have you used every social network component, from live streaming like we are doing today to blogging about the event before or afterwards, and using your entire network to work with people? In the example at the top, an award-winning environment that we created with Cisco, we used the telephone as a metaphor for getting information with the district store manager so that we could see what his communication issues were as he was moving around the store and, trying to figure out how to manage it for the day. There were oil spills that he had to deal with. There was angry customers. There was a recall. And the interface of the telephone made it a very simple way for that person to communicate with other people so that the virtual world extended out to the augmented world, and people began to feel the realness or the real approach for using these environments in both virtual and physical spaces. That's simulated, as you can see in the bottom left-hand side, with people working together. I think that when you work together in these environments, people get deployment very well because they understand what they had to do using various types of technology. For example, they may have been working together, but somebody's on the road, so they Skype into you so that they can ask you a few questions. So you're bringing the expertise in, not necessarily with the virtual world, even though you're working in the virtual world developing, but somebody Skypes in and, you have your, alt tab over to another window, and bam, you have that integration. So when you're thinking about how to carry these things forward, make sure that you integrate all of the other social technologies that are available to you. I think that this is also key to be successful in the environment is you have to find leaders. In fact, the people that really succeed in virtual worlds are those teachers that, like at Marietta Ombro in Finland, where Owen Kelly wanted to create an environment that people would live in. So he created a currency, he created a language, he created reasons for his residents to be there for long periods of time, and he created reasons for everybody else in the university to think of a way that they could come in and contribute on Ombro Marietta, which was the graphics department or the people teaching Adobe Photoshop. He wanted them to come in and make the place look better. He wanted the business schools and the economics school to come in and think about how people could set up transactional environments in the virtual world. And he incorporated everybody into the environment fairly deeply. These kinds of leadership positions are very powerful for transforming people from using just Web 2.0 applications to developing 3.0 applications. It's going to take entrepreneurs, innovators, and leaders in the environment. You have to identify them. You're here because all of you are leaders, and you're able to do any of the things that we've been talking about today. But as you think about transferring that skill, you have to take those teachable moments with the people that you're working with, let them be students or clients, and you have to find those couple of leaders within that group so that they can carry on the advances in the thinking. I think we are just literally at the beginning of thinking about 3D spaces and 3D virtual worlds. A lot of what is created, the environment, is things that we already do that we're just imitating and putting them in the virtual environment. If we're using the virtual environment to its fullest capacity, I think that we would be seeing a huge difference. One of those changes that will come will be the way people interact with each other. And I think that the integration of Connect, the we, natural body movement, natural facial movement is going to have a huge psychological impact on the way people interact in the environment. And so it's going to up the ante. I also think that biosensor data output to the computer about how you're feeling, if your heart is racing, if you're sweating a little bit more. I think that those are going to have an impact as well, because you clearly know that 80% of the conversation that goes on between people, or the communication that goes on between people, is really nonverbal. So we have to think about ways to start taking our leaders to use some of these technologies to get us to the next level. A couple other things is to make sure that you're forming groups. You guys are a perfect example of this, where you come together every week, you continue to delve down into the various subjects. We found in one of our island builds in Club One, I think you had the opportunity to talk to Celeste Deveneaux, from what I understand. And Celeste has some very interesting data, which is another tip that is important to us, is always make sure that there are measures of success in the environment. And one of the ones that we consulted Celeste with was get feedback about why your program is changing individuals. And the individuals that were losing weight more quickly in her study of people following her weight reduction program in the virtual world versus the physical world was this concept of the support groups. And we see this working across all of the virtual worlds for those people who are very loyal to the environment, is that there's a group of people like yourselves that come together to really understand deeply what this environment can do, can measure this, give those results out to your investors, and to your stakeholders, and then even better than that, as you can see with the video up at the top, create this whole concept of testimonials that communicate out to the public what is changing and how this technology is changing. One of the conversations I had recently with Ron Burns, who's the CEO of Proton Media, which I think is an interesting technology to look at, because it's integrated into the Microsoft stack so that you can integrate the virtual world into the back office pretty seamlessly using Microsoft Links and using SharePoint. That's a plus for a lot of communities. But Ron and I were musing over, so what happened to there's going to be 1 billion users in 2011. There's going to be 1 billion avatars in 2011. We do believe, as we see with K0's data, that there probably are 1 billion avatars in the world right now. We don't know where they all are. We just know that they exist. If you're counting a gaming individual as an avatar, then of course you have 1 billion avatars in the world. So people have been extending their personalities into 3D virtual characters for quite some time. But why hasn't virtual worlds replaced Office, for example? And we both muse that probably has to do with the way we are all sideswiped by iPad applications, and how people are just very happy to use the minute by minute little applications that exist on the iPad. Well, what if those iPad applications were objects inside a virtual world? That would be probably a good way to integrate those two technologies, to bring the mobile technology into the virtual technology, and that's what we're seeing is going to happen during this last stage of deployment. I talked about metrics, and one thing that I want to finish with, and we have a couple people here that have been through our program. We teach at the University of Washington a certificate in virtual worlds, where we're training the next generation of individuals to not only plan and design in virtual worlds, but build them and deploy them and make money off of them and extend them into their social experience in very deep ways. And we've had successes in the people who have gone through that course. We have a psychologist that is introducing virtual world technology into the treatment of people with post-traumatic stress disorder. We have one of the students who is spreading out virtual world learning throughout Europe in various universities, like the University of Patras in Greece and the Open University of Catalonia. There's this integration happening because there is a formalism associated, which is what the whole point of this book is, and the whole point of this conversation is that there are proven methodologies that work. There are successful virtual applications that work, and there are successful groups that work. The literature is starting to pour out. This book is one of those examples. I'm in the process of publishing another book called Engaging the Avatar, New Frontiers in Immersive Education. There's enough literature out there to get people to the point where it's time to fund these things and start building significant environments in ways that are going to produce effective results. I hope that gives you a clear picture of what this book is meant to do, what I do in the world, and the relationships and partnerships that I'm looking for, both on the business side and on the academic side, to take this totally to the next level. My last prediction is that we will be hitting those 1 billion avatars, and we will be experiencing a metaverse very soon. Interoperability, scalability, virtual realism, all of these things are around the corner, and I'm really glad that I am here with you to be able to participate in that frontier movement, that pioneer movement for transforming virtual worlds.